Yeah, thank you first of all for even taking this time out to do this interview. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, honestly, I love doing stuff like this. I did like my first kind of like podcast interview back in 2020, and I was excited slash super terrified at the same time. It's nice to like always kind of chat with people and kind of talk about what my work is about and stuff. So that's great. It
Awesome.
I don't have many coworkers, so it's just nice to like chat with people every so often.
Yeah, for sure. And with this one, I always try to make it like as casual as possible too, because I don't want you to feel like it's an interrogation and all that. Like I rather you like be enjoying the conversation and casual, kind of like just the beginning of our conversation as well.
Cool. Yeah, I like it.
Um, yeah, so I guess we can dive right in it. If you see me look to the right of the screen, so I just have another monitor with some like talking points as well that I like
Cool.
pre down. But besides that, I usually just like kind of go off of what you're saying and try to make it flow as smoothly as possible.
Sweet. I like it.
Awesome. So I guess we can start with what's your name, where are you from, and the backstory of you.
Yeah. Again, so my name is Austin Howlett. Currently living in New Mexico. I grew up in Hawaii, Maui, Hawaii. Went from Maui to Colorado and then now New Mexico, essentially. Yeah, and I kind of been doing art and painting and drawing for most of my life since I was a little kid. So it's kind of always been sort of a component of me. And I was an art major in college in Colorado. So that's where I really started to take it a bit more seriously, like sell some work. And essentially, after college, I tried to dabble into like graphic design a little bit because I thought that'd be more like reasonable way to apply art in like the real world, and really didn't like it, and so sort of figured out a way to try to make working as a full-time artist work, and so luckily I've had a lot of support with that decision, so it's very nice.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so like did you grow up with like a very creative family?
Sort of. So me and my siblings were pretty creative in different ways. And my parents luckily really like fostered that, which I think is super important for, anyone really. Because if I didn't have that support, then it wouldn't have really gone anywhere. Yeah, I mean, I honestly kind of think all people are creative in their own ways. And so, my dad was a very creative business person. He worked in real estate, and my mom is a very creative person. She actually, I have an old painting of hers that she did when she was like a little kid, and it was actually really great. It's just like a little still life of flowers. But and she's very creative as well in her own ways and stuff. And I mean, she just had to be creative and raising me and my siblings, honestly. So
Yeah.
I was really lucky that it was fostered. Especially me and my older sister, we loved specifically painting and drawing. And so, it was really nice because they had their sort of like own filters and ways to encourage it. Like my dad was a big surfer, like partially why we were in Maui. And so he would always be like, oh, like I'm going to draw a little silhouette of a surfboard, and like, let's see how you'd put a little design on it. And like, what would you put on this surfboard, if it were to become real life, and stuff like that. So they really fostered it, which was really nice, super helpful. And so, my older sister, she was very creative, like, was able to just imagine amazing things and, paint and draw them out, fairies and mermaids and like really fun stuff like that. So, so I was very lucky that it was fostered from a very young age. And I went to, I'm not sure if you've heard it, it's like a Waldorf school. It's sort of like a specific kind of education, and it's a lot through arts education. And so there was like visual arts and performing arts. And so everything we sort of did was through that creative, filter. And so that worked really well for me because I'm such a visual person. And so, we were sort of like creating our own textbooks. They would like, give us these like empty booklets, and we would, like take notes and draw on them and stuff. And so it was all like very personalized. And so it's very like idyllic for someone like me, and other people it wasn't as great, like if they weren't like naturally like good at drawing or didn't enjoy it, it wasn't as fun, but it luckily worked out pretty well for me. So yeah, it was fostered really nicely from a young age, and I'm very appreciative of that.
Yeah, and obviously you said like your dad is creative in other ways, like he's a businessman. So I think you said realtor as well, in like real estate. What do you think you learned from him on like and took from like his creative side? And then also we can get after expressing that, maybe talk about your mom also painted as well. So maybe what you learned from her as well and how the combination made you who you are today.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, me and my dad nowadays, we kind of can't help but jump into conversations about like business and then art business and stuff, because he worked independently as a real estate agent, and so he kind of has always had that small business mindset. And so so yeah, me and him have sort of had conversations, and he's been able to give pretty great insights, and just like how to interact with people, and talking about your work, and taking pride in your work, and not being in the mindset of being super desperate, like, oh, I'll drop the price as much as you need, and like not haggling as much, like really taking pride and seeing the value in what I can create. And if it's not going to sell with this person, it will sell to someone else eventually. Not worrying about those things as much, I think has really helped. And so me and him sort of have this continual dialogue, sometimes whether or not it's like the appropriate setting, but we'll always kind of go into these kind of things. And I'm very lucky that he invests in that, and like sort of takes what his experience and like diverts it to things that I'm going through. And so that's been really helpful and sort of reassuring. And so I think he's always sort of like had that mindset even before I was, actually taking my art into like a business realm. And yeah, in terms of like my relationship with my mom, I mean, I think a lot of I've been like able to learn a lot from her, just about like emotional regulation and emotional vulnerability, which is such a huge theme of my work. I've been really lucky to have a lot of like really great female influences in my life. And so like my mom and my sisters are definitely like, they were like they were that at the early stages and stuff. And so, yeah, just like being able to like name your emotions and like help, like in a healthy way, express your emotions, and, like finding visual ways to express your emotions, and, like what you're going through, and like, certain concepts that are in your mind, has been like very, influential and stuff. And so, and just like, seeing how she functions as a person, and, she's like very caring and very invested in, her family and people around her. And like, that's just been very like influential for me. I think it's really, heavily influenced just like how I go about life as a person, and then how I, sort of go about my art in a very like raw and vulnerable way, where I'm like, hey, like this is who I am. And it's a little freaky to, and it's a little scary to like present myself in that vulnerable space. Yeah. But like that's, I've been taught that that is a good and valuable thing, from like a young age. And so I think, I've been able to like have the courage to do that, consistently, yeah. I guess.
Yeah. And I think as, 'cause I'm a music artist myself, so I definitely understand the process as artists go through with really truly being vulnerable. And because at the end of the day, we are allowing others to engage and see our vulnerabilities through our art. And sometimes the mental aspect can take a toll on that. And I think it's important that it's amazing that you're raised the way you were, because you're able to learn how to deal with your emotions and learn that they are important, because I think a lot of times these days, especially like with males, it's like we are almost like programmed or like kind of just taught in society that like sometimes we're supposed to be strong all the time, you know, and I think people just may have different perceptions of strength, you know, and I think there's some strength and vulnerability for sure. Because I think when you're able to be vulnerable, you're able to be you. And when you're, you know, and I think that's what makes an artist an artist, is because they're truly being them in all aspects of life. And when you talked about like the woman that you always have like a strong woman presence in your life, that's like one of the things I wrote down. Was I noticed like in your art you had like a lot of times there would be women in it. Like I'm seeing it right now in the background too. And are they like those two the main reasons for that? And how do you like, I guess, channel them into like your artwork?
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, you're very much preaching to the choir with that stuff. So this, I sort of have this Terra Human is sort of like the name and theme of you know, most of my work where people are merged with nature. And I at a certain point actually, you know, this piece up here, it's a little older, but at a certain point I made that piece and I almost couldn't help myself but delve into that concept that you're talking about, especially for men, because I you know, just speaking from my own experience, and I've been very lucky that, you know, I've had a lot of positive experiences with, you know, both men and women, and you know, a lot of great influential people in my life. But, you know, talking about this concept of masculinity that I feel like is very prevalent these days, and, you know, the concept of toxic masculinity, and you know, it kind of became a very important topic to me because, you know, it's sort of a lived experience for me. And I've been very lucky to be in an environment where, you know, femininity wasn't seen as weak. You know, it's just seen as, you know, it's seen as, you know, strong and capable, and, you know, in just the same ways that masculinity can be seen. And, you know, and so, yeah, I've kind of delved into that topic a lot with, you know, essentially anytime I paint a man in a painting, I usually go into that topic just because I sort of can't help myself. And it's really important to me because you know, like for better or worse, there are a lot of male leaders in our world. And if you know, if you think that if they were, you know, raised in a way where they didn't see femininity as such a negative trait, and if they were able to share their emotions in a healthy way, you know, where sort of our world would be if that, you know, if you know, yeah, if that was a part of their lives kind of growing up and stuff. And so, yeah, so that's a big topic for me. So what was the other part of your question? You were sort of asking about like,
yeah, it was more, yeah, more so like channeling, I guess, like the strong woman presence in your life, like your mom and your sister, into like your artwork. And do you do that at all?
Do I?
Do you do that at all? Like kind of like channel their presence?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So the bigger painting behind me is a piece of my partner, my wife, Katie. And yeah, so I've been very lucky to have a lot of you know, incredible like strong female people in my life. You know, yeah, my mom, and I'm a middle child, and so my older sister and younger sister have been super influential. So, you know, like, you know, my siblings were like my best friends growing up. And so I feel like especially my older sister, like as we both got older, there was a certain time period where we were both in high school, and, you know, she was very comfortable calling me on my BS anytime, you know, anytime she saw me sort of slipping in different ways, like she felt comfortable calling me on stuff because, you know, she was my older sister. And I feel like that really kept me in check and kept me like reflecting on things and stuff. And so she was a huge influence early on. But, you know, even past that, I made some, I've been always just a lot more comfortable interacting with girls, and it's just for whatever reason. So I always make friends with girls in whatever environments. And so, you know, it was the same thing in college or high school and then college as well. And so so yeah, I honestly feel like anytime I'm painting, you know, a woman in my pieces, I feel like I'm sort of internally, I'm channeling that person specifically, but I'm also channeling just the female presence in my life, and how that's been such a strong influence in the way that I function, and the work that I create. So like that piece back there is my wife, and over here, like, is my friend from college who I've done several pieces of, and and so I'm always like figuring out, and so like I was lucky enough to like be able to photograph these people, and so I'm always thinking about like how I'm posing them, and what it's suggesting, if it's like a very like emotional and vulnerable state, or if it's like a very strong pose, or if it's sort of like a little bit of both, and how that sort of influences like the overall mood of the piece and stuff. And so yeah, the women in my life have been super influential, and it's definitely had a positive influence on me and my work.
Yeah. And going into like you're kind of saying how you position these women or anybody, your subjects essentially, do you normally like have an idea first before going into it? Like kind of, or sometimes is it just an emotion that you may be having that day? You're like, okay, I need to do this. And like how like deep and detailed do you go into making sure that this emotion is I guess shown in every way possible, because if there are no words, you know what I mean? It's like it has to be like that. I think that's what's like the beautiful part about like visual art like this is with no words, you have to make sure that everything is, I guess, in the best place it could be in the right state so you can express exactly what you want or talk about what you want to convey. And so can you kind of like, I guess, talk about that process?
Yeah. So when I can, I will try to photograph people in my life. It's usually like friends or family. And COVID sort of put a pretty big dent on that. Not seeing, as many people in person and stuff, but it's either that or, if I find photographers that I really like, I will, contact them, like photographers who have photographed people, and I'll contact them and, get permission to use their photos and make sure that's okay and stuff. But yeah, the posing process, it's tough because, I'll sort of get things set up and get lighting set up, and it's a little bit tough to lead people. I hadn't really thought about it because sometimes I'll have a pose in mind or a few poses, and I really don't know how to like position them properly. It's a whole art in and of itself, like, I give, wedding photographers and family photographers a lot of credit for that, because, it's hard, and you want to be respectful and consensual in that process, and, make sure everything's comfortable and stuff. And so, that in itself is a little bit challenging and takes practice. And, I don't do it super frequently, but, I do my best with it. But, yeah, yeah, so I'll sometimes have like a specific pose in mind. There have been a few times where, like this bigger piece, I had that landscape photo that I knew I wanted to use. And so I set up the pose and lighting specifically to, make sense in that landscape. So that it looked realistic and interesting, and, the lighting and shadows are right. So that'll happen occasionally with pieces, but then other times, and this is kind of like a fun process for me, where I'll have, hundreds of, personal photos and photos I've gotten online from other photographers. And it's sort of this fun process where I will just see what works together. And I work on Photoshop a lot on my computer. And so I will be like, okay, like, does the lighting happen to work, with this figure and this pose? And, so it's sort of this fun creative process for me where I'm figuring out, what sort of imagery works together nicely. And honestly, I don't usually think too much about the concepts until I'm working on the piece and then it's finished, because sometimes the process honestly influences the concept of the piece. You know, like this piece way back here, my friend from college, you know, it was a really challenging piece because most of her light, most of her body and her face were in shadow. And so there was just like the lights, that was just how the light source was. And so I had a lot of trouble like painting those shadows and like seeing where everything was, because there was a lot of dark colors. And so that actually influenced sort of the concept of the piece. You know, I titled it, you know, Between Light and Shadow. And I was kind of talking about how sometimes we can be trapped in these shadows that, you know, are a part of our lives, these sort of like negative experiences that, you know, influence us in the present, and how to, you know, live with that and how to live in between, you know, light and shadow basically. And so yeah, so sometimes the process honestly influences like the meaning of the piece. So usually at the, you know, once I finish the piece, I'll, you know, sort of think about it, and I'll usually write about it first, and then out of that sort of writing, I'll bring out a title usually.
Yeah. Yeah, man, that's a really cool process. And it's true, like in art, you may have like one specific goal in mind or just like thought and idea, but as you go through that process, it's like ever changing and evolving. I think that's what makes art beautiful. And have you
Mhm.
always been like a realistic type of artist, or how did you start, I guess?
Yeah, so I feel like, let's see. I think early on when I started oil painting, like in high school, you know, I think naturally I was kind of going towards realism just because that's all I sort of knew. Um, and I think that sort of continued in college. I think it honestly sort of plays to my personality. I am sort of a bit of a perfectionist and a big completionist, and so um, I love the sort of skill associated with realism, but I also, you know, I like that, you know, technique wise it's in realism, but then, you know, in the actual, you know, like rendering of stuff, it's sort of surrealist and you know, a little bit more imaginative. And so I think that's what really like works for me and what I enjoy. So I've always been a very skill oriented person, you know, whatever it is, athletics and art and stuff. And so once I sort of got a taste for like, oh, like I can actually paint this realistically and I can figure out how to do that, you know, semi consistently, it sort of just took to me because I enjoy the skill associated with it. And so you know, I think I just took that and ran with it. And so, you know, and obviously like, you know, things can change. Like, you know, the great thing about, you know, having an art career is, you know, there can be different phases throughout life and stuff. And but yeah, I think sort of just the idea of realism really sort of works with my personality. I'm just a bit of a perfectionist, and I just love details and really getting into stuff and sort of
Yeah.
noticing things, you know, things that other people don't. I'm like, oh, like, you know, this, like noticing a shadow, but then noticing highlights within that shadow and just like little things and stuff. I really enjoy sort of that phase of a painting. And so yeah, so I haven't really tried to, like, if it's sort of how I naturally work, I haven't really tried to go against it, because that's sort of what I enjoy, at least for the time being.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. And it's funny, like as an artist myself, like half of the things that you have in your work, people aren't going to even realize. But for you, it's like I think that's when you know you love something, because you know people won't realize half the things you do, but they'll realize they'll still know that it's a great piece. You know what I mean? And it's funny, like when they actually like realize one of those things, that's like you want that almost more than someone saying this piece is amazing. It's like if someone was to just tell you, oh, the highlight and the shadow, that would probably make you like ecstatic, you know, like because someone's
Hmm.
noticing the little details that you put into it, because without those little details, the piece wouldn't be the piece that it is, you know. And
Yeah.
you also like speak about like being perfectionist, and I also had like this mindset as well, because like what goes back to the details, you just want everything to be perfect, you know what I mean? And I kind of, despite what Kanye does outside of his music, I am like very inspired by him like musically.
Yeah, yeah.
But like one thing that he like said was he was talking about being a betterist instead of a perfectionist, in the sense of like just trying to be better every day instead of trying to be chase perfection, because perfection is awfully often unattainable. And I guess like sometimes like when you're chasing that perfection, you might not end up releasing anything, because you're like, you like something, just like slightly off, no one's gonna realize it, but you, every time you look at it, that's the, even if it's a little dot, that's where your eyes are always gonna go. So how did you, I guess, how have you dealt with that?
Yeah, that's a great question and a great point, because I always sort of shy away from the term perfectionist, and so I'll usually say like completionist and stuff, but I like
Yeah.
actually purist. That's a great term. But yeah, so I I don't usually strive for perfection, but I'm always trying to make each piece better than the last, just for me, mentally, and sometimes that doesn't work, and sometimes, for whatever reason, a piece might just not work, and that's totally fine. But I'm always trying to sort of feel this upward trajectory, even if it's not, super steep, and if I'm not shooting, up in skill level. If I'm always I kind of always look at it as like practice, even if a piece is for like a gallery show or something, like each piece is just sort of practice for the next one. And very much, and I know you get this, is that like like the art that we do is not this like inherent talent that we just have and are rolling off of. Like it's a skill that we are working on every day, to make better, and better ourselves through it. And so practice really does help. And if you have that growth mindset, and again, like I've been very lucky that people I've been in relationship with and interacted with in my life, a lot of them also have that sort of growth mindset of, like nothing has to be perfect, but I'm just trying to get a little bit better each day. And that's what really helps me, because, yeah, sometimes like a painting does not work the way you think it will. And, if you're in that perfectionist mindset, that can destroy you mentally, or or you just keep working on a piece and you never actually do anything with it. And so being in this growth mindset of like, okay, I've done everything I can with this piece, and now I'm going to move on from it, and hoping that the next one will be better, essentially. So yeah, definitely just trying to be in that long-term growth mindset,
Yeah.
that nothing has to be perfect right now, but I just want to get a little bit better. And that's why I like to sort of post, I'll sort of post these throwbacks of like comparing two pieces that sort of like similar subject matter and stuff, and just showing the development of like my skill over the course of a few years. And just as like, hey, like sometimes like sometimes you need that context a little bit, and it helps you, and you're like, okay, like I am growing, like
Yeah.
even though I've been whatever, having a tough time with pieces, like you can see that growth.
Yeah, it's very important, I think, to like not look back all the time, but definitely look back when, especially when you're unmotivated or feel like, you know, you didn't do something right for a week or haven't been as productive as you are, and just feel down, because like back to the point of being vulnerable and letting out the emotions, sometimes it's hard, because where it's a lot of mental capacity that you need to do, like be as vulnerable as you are as an artist, and to constantly let the creativity flow. So like I guess like also, how have you dealt with, I guess, the mental side of being an artist, and maybe any dark times that you have went through, that you how have you found yourself getting out of it, and obviously like it's almost like every day is a challenge or a new day to like conquer. So I guess what's also your day-to-day routine, if you have any, to like help balance your mental?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, there are definite sort of, I think honestly, like probably in the last year or two, I've definitely had, uh, sort of like stronger, like actual trials where, my emotions were very heightened, because of what was going on in my career. And, um, sometimes you'll have a lot of buildup, and you're anticipating success for, a certain piece or a certain group of pieces, and, it just doesn't work out. And like handling that, um, handling the reality when it sort of, comes in that, things didn't work out. And, so, sort of as an example, like I had a solo show with my gallery. It was like an online solo show in June. And in preparation for that, I had sort of known through other artists that, the prep for a big show can be really stressful. And, up until that point, I'd only done sort of like group shows. And like, so it wasn't all of my work and, sort of like my stuff on the line. And, so I had like a few actual breakdowns where, the stress really got to me, and sort of my, perfectionism, completionism mentality was at times working against me, where, like I wanted to put my best work out there, but I had a deadline that I was working with. And so I was like trying to, like I was like trying to like finish pieces, but they really needed to be done before I could send them off to the gallery and stuff. And so, yeah, so that, there was definitely some like real emotions there and real stress. And, like I wasn't sleeping super well. And like what was tough about that time period is like, up until then, art has been such a like comforting place for me. And like, I've worked hard to make it that way. And in that time period, it was definitely like, waffling into, not exactly comforting, but really stressful. And that can absolutely happen. And, it doesn't say anything bad about, you as a person or as a creative, but, yeah, and so what really helped me, in that moment was, I am lucky enough to have a partner who is, very supportive and can get me out of my head and, support me in those moments. But then also like you're talking about like having like a set routine that you can fall back on, is super helpful. And I think that's what was tough about that time period was I was very out of my routine because I had all these scattered things to get ready for the show. I had to go get things framed, and I was like writing a whole bunch about every painting and stuff. And so the routine was a little bit out of whack. And I was like, oh, like I just want to like do my normal routine, like get in the studio and like paint and like be working towards something. And so yeah, I think when the routine kind of gets thrown off, it can throw you off mentally a little bit. But yeah, in terms of my routine, I really I I've grown up as sort of an athlete, and I continue to do athletics. And so I love routine and sort of treating my work like practice. And so I usually try to treat my hours as close to like a 9 to 5 as possible, where I get in the studio every day, unless there's something extraneous I need to do. But I will always gravitate towards being in here and whatever painting I'm working on, getting into it right away. And I think it just like grounds me, and like that routine of it really sort of keeps me in sync. And the rhythm of it is really good. But yeah, so I'll try to like I'll try to paint like 6 or 7 hours a day, and it'll sort of be intermingled with other social media things or website things or like whatever. But the actual act of painting is just is really important to me and like really grounds me. And so that's what I really try to like stick to, especially like at the beginning of the day, like not feeling like, oh, like should I do, this or that, and like just getting in here and like starting on something, and then other things can happen, but the routine of actually getting in here and working just really helps me out mentally.
Yeah, for sure. It's crazy how much like routine is like so vital to just like your mental health. And I think you're doing it the right way, like by treating it kind of like a 9 to 5, because then you're giving yourself you're trying to be in like disciplined as well, and setting like parameters and like boundaries of when you want to work and when that free time is after to like relax the mind, because like relaxation and rest is like just as important as like grinding and creating. And also like to go back to like your other topics or subjects I saw you would also create before, or often create about, is like animals or like hands. What's the significance to that?
Yeah, so I think the painting of hands kind of came out of happenstance. I did it a lot, I feel like, in college because I thought hands were interesting and they're always nearby and easy to paint or draw. And but I sort of got back into it, I think in like 2019, 2020-ish. And people really responded to it. And I found it was a nice sort of branch off from just painting full figure people. It was nice to sort of like illustrate like just a sort of component of people, but a very important component. And especially for me, like, using my hands to paint. Um, and so I think that also kind of grew into, I think from that, I sort of started to do like nature things, like a tree growing out of a hand, and I really enjoyed that. So it just sort of turned into this nice little like pivot from my normal incorporation of humans and nature, and then it honestly might have been prompted by a show with my gallery. They had an animal themed show, and at that time I was just taking as many opportunities as I could, and so the curator is like, can you do this show? Like, do you paint animals? And I was like, yes, I do. Now I do. Sure. And so, and like I had the confidence that like, I'll figure it out. Like, and so that sort of got me into, but I still wanted to sort of have the incorporation of people as well. And so I think it made this little marriage of like, okay, like animals as a part of nature and then humans, like it makes sense for me mentally. And I started, I enjoyed it. And I think, other people enjoyed it. And it was just like a nice little like branch off my main theme. And yeah, and so then, I think the sort of first one that, took it a bit further was the doing hands with like a glowing butterfly. And I was like, I just sort of came up with the idea and I was like, this would be, interesting and fun. And not to say like the idea is completely my own. I have absolutely seen other, artists do artworks of glowing butterflies, glowing animals and stuff. But I, wanted to have sort of my own take on it. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the piece. I enjoyed the effect that I was creating. And, and so, yeah, it sort of took me in this other direction of like this relationship between people and animals and how that's, also very special. And, like for some of us, it's like a bit of a lost connection and sort of like, reintroducing it. And, especially like with the hands, like being so expressive towards like an animal and, like in this way of like caring for it, sort of conceptually. And so, yeah, so it just sort of turned into this like sort of sub theme that I had. And, yeah, it's very enjoyable. And like in that regard, it's really nice to have, sort of other areas to go into that are still like under the umbrella of my same theme, but, are, different and different, like compositionally and different subject matter. Like it's nice because, for me, it feels like I'm still in that same theme, but it's just like, it's like a little mental shift. So I'm like, okay, this is something like very different and enjoyable and stuff, and people seem to like it. So yeah, so for like my solo show, I had like hands with like a glowing hummingbird. It was actually my older sister, her hands that I photographed when we saw each other over the holidays. And so yeah, that's kind of been a fun little like, branch off for me. And it's nice to have that variety.
For sure. Yeah. I bet that's like nice mentally too, because you're still creating, but you're able to kind of like almost like open up new pathways for different ways of creating and how to create. And I bet that almost has an effect on then how you, when you go back to your actual normal style and what's your normal subjects, there's probably things that you learn from working with those type of artworks that can maybe like make your stuff better. And I know you were also like talking about just the connection to nature, and it just brought me back to when you were speaking about like surfing with your dad. Do you think like do you think you take anything from that moment of surfing and that place of like tranquility and connecting with nature into like your artwork today?
Yeah, that's a great sort of thought there. Yeah, I feel like yeah, so like my dad grew up surfing, so it's kind of been like his sport, but when we were young, he introduced us, and so we had sort of different phases of really getting into it and stuff. And I think with that, that sport, it really is sort of like this harmony of, humans and nature, like the wave is just a natural occurring thing. And, he always really taught us growing up to have a respect for the ocean, because it is extremely powerful. And it takes a lot to know it, like I've loved seeing his sort of relationship with the ocean. And he knows about the tides and how they affect waves, and he knows how the weather affects waves. And so that was always fun sort of just seeing growing up. And yeah, I feel like it does sort of play into that concept of having respect for nature and a humility towards it. That's like a really big theme for my work. And so I think seeing his relationship, with that activity, and then also just, living in a place like Hawaii and then living in a place like Colorado, I feel like I've been lucky enough to live in places where, like you can see with other people, like there's this, like sense of awe and humility with nature around them, and respect for it that I've always really enjoyed. But I really feel like that kind of started with being in Hawaii, and sort of like seeing that firsthand. And like, if like as like a kid, like if you go in the ocean and like you aren't paying attention and you aren't having respect for it, like it'll mess you up. And like that that'll happen where like like me and my siblings get crushed by a wave, and like well, you had your back to the ocean, so you won't see what was happening behind you, just stuff like that. So
Yeah.
yeah, and just like ocean, and like going on hikes in Maui, and like like I was a bit of a thrill seeker, so going cliff jumping and like just stuff like that. Like it was all in relationship with nature, and like out of sort of like respect for it and stuff. So yeah, definitely really sort of played in. So that's I definitely feel like I'm on track with the sort of subject of my work in that regards.
Yeah, that's dope, man. My aunt and uncle used to live in Hawaii, and I went there twice to go visit them, and there's nothing like Hawaii. It's so beautiful. But I think I also enjoy like the connection with nature too, and just being able to go out to places with beautiful mountains or just like forest. And I'm big on water. Something about water, I just feel like, I don't know, it's like I just have this huge connection to, maybe because we're 70% water or how many percentages, but like it's just like, I don't know, there's something that just draws me to it. And I think a lot of artists feel that way too, because I think we're just like naturally very connected and very like self-aware, and just have a huge awareness for everything around us, even when it comes down to the little nature that surrounds us as well. And you were talking also about like your show, the Terra Human show. I know you talked about it some, but I was going to ask you a follow-up question to this one, was going to be like, what are your goals And so I want to ask before that, how was it accomplishing like a goal of yours probably to have like a solo show? And how did that feel? And I guess that's now, this is like, I know we're talking about looking back sometimes and see how far you come. This is from 2020. So looking back at it now, like how have you progressed and how proud of you, of how proud are you of yourself for having something that you've always wanted to accomplish?
Yeah, it definitely felt like a big success when the curator contacted me about it. I think in like the fall of 2021, and I was just like over the moon, like, and again, like it was an online solo show. The gallery has sort of, they since the pandemic, they sort of continued like their more like online presence, and they were doing a little less in-person stuff, but still I was so excited to have the possibility of doing having a show that was just featuring my work, and uh, you know, making it my own, and really getting into it and stuff. And so, I had essentially like 6 or 7 months that I was, preparing for it. And yeah, it really had ups and downs, but it was all very exciting for me. And what was really nice for me is like at that point, I had a very strong idea of how long pieces take for me. And so I sort of plotted out, okay, like depending on the size, if each piece took, like a month or so to work on, how many I could get done and which pieces I wanted to do and stuff. And so that just logistically, that really helped me, like kind of have success there in just planning out and, making sure I got done what I wanted to get done. And, but yeah, the whole process was really exciting. And, like I had mentioned towards the end, it was a little bit stressful, and there was a lot of moving pieces. And sort of another factor that I mentally forget about is in that springtime, our town was like almost under evacuation for a wildfire that was nearby. And so me and my wife actually sort of decided to like self-evacuate because we were worried that we were just worried, and we were lucky enough to have a place to stay in Colorado. And so and that was like a month or so, a few weeks to a month before the show opening. And so that was also another tough layer, because I needed to get pieces framed. And so I was going to a different frame shop in Colorado, and and so I had to like bring my easel and like all of my supplies to continue working on pieces. And so, that was sort of like another factor to it. But overall, I was really happy with the work I was able to create. And I was happy with how I was able to handle the stress of the process, and handle just all the other logistics, because if you're really trying to like, make it as successful as possible, like I was not only thinking about the pieces, but then framing and then documenting everything for social media as much as I could. And then, getting official photographs, editing them, there was a lot that went into it, a lot that I had to think about before I gave the pieces away. So I definitely was proud with how I was able to handle everything. And yeah, it was very exciting. And yeah, I'm really happy with how it turned out and the pieces that I made. So yeah, it was a great opportunity, and I'm like really appreciative of it, because not everyone gets that. So and then you were asking about goals looking forward.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm on a little bit of a like break with this particular gallery, because essentially they contacted me like in 2020, and so I've been working with them for like about 2 years now. And this like past year, it's just been kind of straight, just doing show after show, and it was deadline after deadline, and it was a lot. So just recently, like this piece down here, I was able to make like just for myself, just to sell directly from me and not have it be from the gallery in a show. Like, you know, and that's the other tough part is like, you know, giving your pieces away, you know, to the gallery and then not having them there with you and not being able to like continually document them and stuff. So, yeah, so, you know, I've had a few commissions. I'm working on a commission right now. And so it's been nice to just not have those super strict deadlines at the moment. You know, I want to continue to do these shows and have these opportunities and stuff because I think they're great. But having a little bit of a break has been nice. So yeah, you know, looking forward, I just, you know, I want to continue to, you know, look at show opportunities, whether it's with this gallery in Denver or other galleries, and, you know, also, you know, continue to develop like my personal base of followers and collectors and, you know, like foster that so that it doesn't always feel like I need the gallery. And, you know, so like, you know, engaging people that follow me more and, fostering those sort of relationships and stuff. And so, yeah, it's also been a nice opportunity to like work a little bit bigger. I think with a lot of the shows that I've had with the gallery, they've been really asking for smaller pieces, and so it's been nice to work a little bit bigger and have a bit of like a longer term project to work on and stuff. So. You know, that might also be in the cards, just like, you know, doing some bigger paintings that like I can really, you know, enjoy the process on and, you know, make something that feels really significant to me.
Yeah, totally understand. And I'm excited to see like where you go with it, man. I just want to say I really appreciate you taking the time to do this interview. Like if an hour flew by and it's because I don't know, it just felt natural and organic, and that's what I always enjoy. So I really appreciate the conversation.